The colony ship Bright Horizon fell from the sky like a wounded bird. It crashed through clouds of orange and purple, tearing apart as it hit the atmosphere of Varus 7. Metal screamed. Fire bloomed across the hull. When it finally struck the ground, the impact could be felt for miles in every direction. Park Yuna woke up in darkness. Her ears were ringing. Blood ran down her forehead into her eyes. She could smell smoke and burning plastic. For a long moment, she could not remember where she was or what had happened. Then she heard the crying dot. It was not human crying. It was high-pitched, desperate, and coming from somewhere nearby. Yuna pushed herself up on shaking arms. Her body hurt everywhere, but nothing seemed broken. She wiped the blood from her eyes and looked around. The cargo hold was destroyed. Crates had broken open. Equipment was scattered everywhere. Emergency lights flashed red, casting strange shadows on the walls. And there, in the corner, she saw them. 6 small creatures huddled together in the ruins of their transport cage. They were Filari cubs, genetically enhanced feline animals bred as companion pets for wealthy colonists. They were worth more money than Yuna would earn in 10 years. But right now, they were just scared babies calling for help. Yuna crawled toward them. Glass cut her palms. She did not care. When she reached the cage, she found that the door had been torn off in the crash. The cubs looked up at her with huge golden eyes. They were trembling. "It's okay," Yuna whispered. "I've got you. It's okay." She reached in and picked up the first cub. It was the size of a small cat, covered in soft silver fur. The moment it touched her chest, it stopped crying and began to purr. One by one, she gathered all 6 cubs into her arms. They pressed against her, seeking warmth and safety. Their tiny claws dug into her jacket, but she did not mind. Yuna was a veterinary specialist. She had been hired to care for the cubs during the journey to the new colony world. Now she was the only one they had left. Their original handler, an old man named Kang, had been in the front section of the ship. Yuna had seen that section break away and burn up in the atmosphere. She was their mother now. The next few hours were chaos. Survivors gathered outside the wreckage. Some were injured badly. Some were dead. Yuna counted 47 people still alive out of 300 passengers. They had crashed in a valley surrounded by thick alien forest. The trees were tall and dark, with leaves that looked like purple glass. Kim Do-won, the ship's security chief, took charge. He was a hard man with a scar on his chin and cold eyes. He organized the survivors, set up a perimeter, and sent scouts to explore the area. When he saw Yuna with the cubs, his expression turned sour. "Those things will slow us down," he said. "They'll attract predators with their noise and smell. We should release them." Yuna held the cubs closer. "They're just babies. They won't survive alone. Neither will we if we're carrying dead weight. They're not dead weight. They're my responsibility." Do-won stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head and walked away. Yuna knew he would bring this up again. But for now, she had won. The first night was the worst. The survivors built fires and huddled together for warmth. The planet's sun had set, and the temperature dropped quickly. Strange sounds came from the forest clicks and howls, and something that sounded almost like laughter. The cubs refused to leave Yuna's lap. They piled on top of each other, 6 warm bodies pressing against her stomach. She stroked their fur and hummed softly to keep them calm. Around midnight, the first predator appeared. Someone screamed. Yuna looked up and saw it standing at the edge of the firelight. It was massive, at least 3 meters tall, standing on 4 powerful legs. Its body was covered in dark scales that reflected the flames. It had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on its face, and a mouthful of teeth the length of Yuna's fingers. Venom dripped from claws as long as knives. The creature was a Shral. Yuna had read about them in the ship's database before the crash. They were apex predators, the most dangerous animals on Varth 7. They hunted in packs and could take down prey 10 times their size. But this one was not attacking. It simply stood there, watching. Dohan raised his weapon, but one of the other survivors grabbed his arm. "Don't," the man whispered. "If you miss, or if there are more of them." They waited. The Shral watched. Its 4 eyes moved slowly across the camp, examining each survivor in turn. When its gaze reached Yuna, it stopped. The cubs had woken up. They were staring at the predator with wide eyes. But they did not make a sound, after what felt like hours. The Shral turned and disappeared into the darkness. No one slept after that over the next few days. The survivors saw more Shral. They were always watching from the tree line, never attacking, never coming close. It was Choi Yoonji, the ship's xenobiologist, who first noticed the pattern. "It's the same group," she told Yuna. "I've been tracking their markings. And there's one who's bigger than the others. Much bigger. I think she's the leader." Yuna had seen her too. The largest Shral was a female with distinctive red markings on her scales. She moved with a grace that seemed wrong for something so huge. The other survivors had started calling her the Predator Queen. "Why aren't they attacking?" Yuna asked. Yoonji shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe they're waiting for us to weaken. Maybe they're curious. These creatures have never seen humans before. We might be as strange to them as they are to us." That night, Yuna sat by the fire with the cubs sleeping in her lap. She watched the tree line and thought about the Predator Queen. Those 4 eyes had looked at her with something that was not hunger. It was something else. Something almost like recognition. The queen appeared again just before dawn. She stood at the edge of the forest, her massive body half hidden in shadow. She looked at Yuna. Yuna looked back. Neither of them looked away for a long time. The cubs stirred in Yuna's lap, making soft sounds in their sleep. One of them, the smallest one, who Yuna had started calling Dory, opened his golden eyes and yawned. Then he saw the Predator Queen and let out a tiny growl. The queen's head tilted slightly. Then, slowly, she retreated back into the forest. Yuna let out a breath she did not know she was holding. She looked down at little Dory, who was already falling back asleep. "Brave boy," she whispered. Stupid, but brave. She did not know what the queen wanted. She did not know why the Shral were watching them instead of hunting them. But she knew one thing for certain. She would not let anything hurt her cubs. Not the predators. Not the planet. Not even Dowan. They were hers now. And she would protect them with everything she had. 3 weeks passed on Varith 7. The survivors built shelters from the wreckage of the ship. They found a stream nearby with clean water. They learned which plants were safe to eat and which ones would make them sick. Life became a routine of survival. The Falari cubs grew quickly. They were no longer the tiny trembling things Yuna had pulled from the broken cage. Now they were the size of large house cats with long legs and sharp teeth. Their silver fur had developed patterns, stripes, and spots that were different for each cub. Yuna had named all of them. Bori was the largest, a brave male who was always the first to explore new things. Nabi was gentle and quiet, with patches of white on her chest. Taru was the troublemaker, always getting into places he should not be. Gummy was lazy and loved to sleep in the sun. Haru was the fastest, able to run circles around the others. And Duri, the smallest, had become Yuna's shadow. He followed her everywhere and cried if she was out of his sight. For more than a few minutes, the other survivors had grown fond of the cubs despite everything. The children especially loved them. Even Dowan had stopped complaining, though he still watched them with suspicious eyes. But the Shral were still out there. Still watching, Yoonji spent her days studying them. She set up cameras near the tree line and recorded their behavior. What she found surprised everyone. They're not just animals, she told the group one evening. They have a social structure. A language. Look at this. She showed them footage of the Shral pack communicating. They used clicks and growls and movements of their heads and tails. Different sounds meant different things. When the predator queen made a low rumbling noise, the others would gather around her. When she hissed sharply, they would scatter and hide. They're intelligent, Yoonji said. Maybe not human-level intelligent, but close. They have culture. They have rules. Yuna watched the footage carefully. She saw something else that Yoonji had not mentioned. In several clips, the predator queen was grooming smaller Shral babies. Cubs. Just like Yuna's Falari. She has children, Yuna said softly. Yoonji nodded. Yes, but I've noticed something strange. In the older footage from the first week, there were 5 cubs. Now there are only 3. What happened to the others? I don't know. Something killed them. Another predator, maybe? Or a rival pack. Yoonji paused. I think that's why she hasn't attacked us. She's lost half her children. She's scared. That night, Yuna could not sleep. She sat outside her shelter with the cubs piled around her. The 2 moons of Vera 7 hung in the sky, casting silver light over everything. She thought about the predator queen, a mother who had lost her babies. A hunter who was also afraid. They were not so different, Yuna realized. They both had small ones to protect. They both lived in fear of losing them. A few days later, something happened that changed everything. Yuna was collecting water from the stream when she heard Nabi screaming. It was a high, terrified sound that made her blood run cold. She dropped her container and ran back to camp. A young Shral had entered the perimeter. It was smaller than the others, maybe a juvenile, testing its courage. It had cornered Nabi against a rock. The little Falari was puffed up to twice her size, hissing and spitting, but she was clearly terrified. The other survivors were frozen. Dohan was reaching for his weapon, but he was too far away. The Shral was going to kill Nabi before anyone could stop it. Yuna did not think. She just moved. She walked toward the Shral. Not running, not screaming, just walking. Her steps were steady and calm. Her hands hung loose at her sides. Hey, she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. Look at me. The Shral turned its head. 4 eyes focused on Yuna. It made a confused clicking sound. This was not how prey behaved. Prey ran. Prey screamed. This small, soft creature was walking toward it like it had no fear at all. Yuna kept walking until she was standing between the Shral and Nabi. She could smell the predator, now a sharp, musky scent like wet metal. Its breath was hot on her face. One bite would kill her. One swipe of those claws would tear her in half. She did not move. She did not look away. Go, she said. This one is mine. Go find your own. The Shral stared at her. Seconds passed. Then, with a sound that was almost like a whimper, it backed away. It turned and ran into the forest without looking back. Yuna let out a long breath. Her legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand. She turned around and picked up Nabi, holding the trembling cub against her chest. It's okay, she whispered. I've got you. You're safe. Doan reached her side, his face pale. What the hell was that? Why didn't it attack you? Yuna shook her head. I don't know. But she did know. Or at least, she was starting to understand. That night, she talked to Yoonji about it. The xenobiologist listened carefully, her eyes growing wider with each word. You stood your ground, Yoonji said slowly. You didn't run, didn't scream, didn't act like prey. You acted like... like another predator protecting her territory. Is that enough to scare them off? Maybe. Humans are strange, Yuna. We're not built like predators. No claws, no fangs, no armor. But we're also not built like prey. We don't have the instincts to flee. Our ancestors were persistence hunters. We chased things until they died of exhaustion. That's a very different kind of danger. Yunji pulled up some old Earth research on her tablet. There's a theory that human eye contact is uniquely unsettling to other species. We have visible whites in our eyes, which most animals don't have. When we stare at something, it knows we're looking at it. That's threatening. Yuna thought about the Shrall's eyes. 4 of them, all focused on her. And she had stared right back without flinching. So when I stood my ground, you confused it. You didn't fit any pattern, it understood. And when an apex predator meets something it doesn't understand, it gets careful. It retreats. The next morning, Yuna tested the theory. A snake-like creature with too many legs entered the camp, heading toward the area where the cubs were playing. Yuna walked toward it calmly, speaking in a low, steady voice. The creature froze. Then it turned and fled. Word spread quickly among the survivors. People started watching Yuna differently. Some looked at her with respect. Others looked at her with something close to fear. She was not bothered by either. A young girl named Beat Jisoo started following her around. Jisoo was 15 years old and had lost both her parents in the crash. She barely spoke to anyone, but she seemed calm around Yuna and the cubs. She would sit quietly nearby, watching them play, sometimes reaching out to pet Haru or Gomi when they came close. One day, Jisoo finally spoke to Yuna. "How do you do it?" she asked. Her voice was small and hoarse from disuse. "How are you not scared?" Yuna looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled sadly. "I am scared," she admitted. "All the time. But they need me not to show it." She gestured at the cubs, who were wrestling in the dirt nearby. When you're responsible for something small and helpless, you don't get to be weak. You have to be strong for them, even when you don't feel strong. Jisoo was quiet. Then she sat down next to Yuna, pulling her knees to her chest. "Can I stay here?" she asked. "With you and the cubs?" Yuna put an arm around her shoulders. "Of course you can." At the edge of the tree line, hidden in shadow, 4 red-marked eyes watched them. The predator queen observed the human female gathering the small ones around her. She saw the way the cubs pressed against the human, the way the young female leaned into her side. The queen understood protection. She understood the bond between a mother and her children. She watched for a long time. Then, silently, she disappeared into the forest. Something was changing. Yuna could feel it. The way the Shrall looked at their camp was different now. Less hungry, more curious. She did not know what it meant yet, but she had a feeling she would find out soon. The days grew longer on Vera 7 as the planet moved closer to its sun. The survivors adapted to the heat, building shade structures and working mostly in the early morning and late evening. The cubs loved the warmth. They would spread out on flat rocks and sleep for hours, their silver fur glowing in the sunlight. Yuna had become something new to the group. Not a leader exactly. The Huan still gave orders and made decisions. But people looked to her when they were afraid. When strange sounds came from the forest, they watched her face to see if she was worried. When predators appeared at the edge of camp, they waited for her to act. She was the one who stood between them and the darkness. The one who did not run. Jisoo never left her side now. The teenage girl had become Yuna's assistant, helping care for the cubs and keep watch at night. The cubs adored her. Three especially loved to curl up in her lap and purr until he fell asleep. It was the first time Yuna had seen Jisoo smile since the crash. One afternoon, Yuna was teaching Jisoo how to check the cubs for parasites when Yoonji came running toward them. The xenobiologist was out of breath, her face pale. "Something's wrong," Yoonji gasped. "The Shral, they're agitated. All of them. I've never seen them like this." Yuna stood up, her heart beating faster. "What's happening?" "I don't know. But they're scared. Even the queen." They hurried to the observation point Yoonji had set up near the tree line. Through the cameras, Yuna could see the Shral pack moving restlessly through the forest. The predator queen was pacing back and forth, making sounds Yuna had never heard before. Sharp, anxious clicks that made the other Shral whimper. Then Yuna saw what was causing the panic. Another pack of Shral was approaching through the forest. They were larger and more numerous than the queen's pack. Their scales were darker, almost black, and their bodies were covered in old scars. At the front of the group walked the biggest Shral Yuna had ever seen, a male with one eye missing and a jaw that hung slightly open, showing rows of yellow teeth. "A rival pack," Yoonji whispered. "They must be moving into this territory, looking for new hunting grounds. Will they fight? Maybe. Or maybe the queen will retreat. She's outnumbered, and she's already lost cubs this season. She might not want to risk the ones she has left." Yuna watched the rival male stalking through the trees. There was something wrong about him. Something cruel. The way he moved, the way the other Shral flinched away from him. He was not just a predator. He was a killer who enjoyed killing. For 3 days, the two packs circled each other. The tension in the air was thick enough to taste. The survivors stayed close to camp, not daring to venture far. Even Dohwan looked nervous. On the 4th day, the rival pack made their move. Dohwan had sent a scout party to find more food sources. 5 people, including 2 of the strongest men in the group. They were supposed to be back before sunset. When the sun went down and they had not returned, Yuna felt ice form in her stomach. They came back an hour later. They were running, screaming, covered in blood. 2 of them were being carried by the others. One was missing an arm. Another was not moving at all. Behind them, crashing through the forest, came the rival Shral. The camp erupted into chaos. People screamed and ran in every direction. Dohwan tried to organize a defense, but it was too late. The rival pack was already among them, their dark shapes moving through the firelight like nightmares come to life. Yuna grabbed Jisoo and the cubs. "This way," she said, her voice sharp. "Follow me. Don't look back." They ran toward the rocky outcropping at the edge of camp. It was high ground, defensible, with only one approach. If they could reach it, they might survive. Bori ran at Yuna's heels, his young legs pumping hard. Nabi and Taru were right behind him. Gumi was slower, his lazy nature working against him now, but Haru circled back and nipped at his hindquarters to keep him moving. Jisoo carried Dory in her arms, the smallest cub too frightened to run on his own. They were almost there when the rival Alpha appeared in front of them. He stepped out from behind a boulder, blocking their path. Up close, he was even more terrifying than Yuna had imagined. His remaining eye gleamed with hunger and cruelty. His claws were dark with old blood. He looked at Yuna and her small group the way a human might look at insects. Food. Nothing more. Yuna pushed Jisoo behind her. The cubs clustered at her legs, pressing against her ankles. They were trembling, but none of them ran. They stayed with her, even though every instinct must have been screaming at them to flee. The Alpha took a step forward. His mouth opened, showing teeth as long as Yuna's hand. Yuna did not run. She did not scream. She straightened her spine and looked directly into that one cruel eye. "No," she said. Her voice did not shake. "You don't get to have them." The Alpha paused. His head tilted slightly, confused. This was wrong. The soft creature should be running. It should be crying, begging, trying to escape. Instead, it was standing there, blocking his path, acting like it had any right to challenge him. He took another step forward. Yuna did not move. The cubs pressed harder against her legs. Then, one by one, they turned to face the alpha. Bori first, his fur standing on end, his tiny fangs bared. Then Nabi, then Taru, then Gomi, then Haru. Even little Duri squirmed out of Jisu's arms and took his place beside his siblings. 6 small creatures, barely bigger than house cats, facing down an apex predator that could kill them all with one swipe of his claw. The alpha stared at them. This made no sense. Nothing made sense. The prey was not acting like prey. The tiny creatures were not running. And the human female at the center of it all was looking at him with eyes that held no fear at all. For the first time in his life, the rival alpha felt uncertain. And then, from the darkness behind him, came a sound that made even Yuna's blood run cold. A roar. Deep and thunderous, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The predator queen emerged from the forest. She was magnificent and terrible. Her scales gleamed red in the moonlight. Her 4 eyes blazed with fury. She was smaller than the rival alpha, but she moved with a purpose that he lacked. She was not here to hunt. She was here to protect. The queen placed herself between the alpha and Yuna's group. She did not look at Yuna. She did not need to. They both understood what was happening. This was not about territory anymore. This was not about food or dominance or survival. This was about the small ones. The rival alpha snarled. The queen snarled back. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, the alpha began to back away. He was outnumbered now. His pack was scattered, dealing with other survivors. And the queen was looking at him with the kind of rage that did not care about winning or losing. She would fight him to the death if she had to. She would die to protect the creatures behind her. He was a killer, but he was also a survivor. And survivors knew when to retreat. The rival alpha turned and vanished into the darkness. His pack followed, melting away into the forest like shadows. The queen stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then she turned her massive head and looked at Yuna. Their eyes met. Human and alien, mother and mother, protector and protector. Yuna bowed her head slightly. It was not submission. It was gratitude. It was recognition. The queen made a low sound, not a growl, not a threat. Something softer, almost gentle. Then she, too, disappeared into the night. Jisu was crying. The cubs were climbing all over Yuna, mewing and purring and pressing against her as if trying to make sure she was still real. Yuna gathered them all in her arms, cubs and girl together, and held them tight. They had survived. Somehow, impossibly, they had survived, and something new had begun. The morning after the attack was quiet. Too quiet. The survivors moved through the camp like ghosts, cleaning up the destruction, tending to the wounded, burying the dead. 7 people had died in the attack. 12 more injured. The smell of blood hung heavy in the air. Yuna worked alongside everyone else, helping where she could. But her mind kept returning to the moment when the predator queen had stepped between her and the rival alpha. She could not stop thinking about those 4 eyes looking at her, with something that was not hunger or fear or hatred. It was recognition. One mother seeing another. Dohan found her near the stream, washing blood from her hands. His face was tired and lined with new wrinkles that had not been there a month ago. "We need to talk," he said. Yuna nodded and followed him to a quiet spot away from the others. The cubs trailed behind her as always, with Jisu bringing up the rear. "What happened last night?" Dohan began slowly. "I don't understand it." "That creature, the big one. The queen, she protected you." "Why? I don't know," Yuna admitted. "Not completely. But I think she sees something in me." Something familiar. What do you mean? Yuna looked down at Bori, who was sitting on her foot and cleaning his paw. She's a mother. She's lost children. She knows what it means to protect the small ones, to be willing to die for them. When she looks at me with my cubs, she sees herself. The Dohwan was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. That's insane. These things are animals, monsters. They killed 7 of our people last night. The rival pack killed our people, Yuna corrected gently. The Queen's pack has never attacked us. Not once. They've been watching us for weeks, and they've never hurt anyone. Yet. They haven't hurt anyone yet. Maybe, or maybe they never will. Yuna met his eyes steadily. I'm not saying we should trust them. I'm saying we shouldn't assume we understand them. They're not like us, but they're not mindless either. They have families. They have feelings. They make choices. Dohan opened his mouth to argue, but before he could speak, a shout came from the perimeter. Movement in the trees. Something's coming. Everyone scrambled for weapons. Yuna picked up the cubs and held them close, her heart pounding. Jizu pressed against her side, her face pale with fear. But it was not an attack. The predator queen emerged from the forest alone. She walked slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. In her mouth, she carried something large and limp, a dead animal, freshly killed. She stopped at the edge of the camp and lowered her head, placing the carcass on the ground. Then she stepped back and waited. No one moved. No one breathed. The queen stood there, patient as stone, her 4 eyes moving across the gathered humans. What is she doing? Someone whispered. Eung pushed forward, her eyes wide with wonder. It's an offering, she said. She's bringing us food. This is a peace gesture. She's trying to communicate. Dowan's hand tightened on his weapon. It could be a trap. It's not a trap, Yuna said quietly. She handed the cubs to Jisu and stepped forward. Yuna, don't. Dowan reached for her arm, but she shook him off. She walked toward the queen slowly, just as she had walked toward the young Shral weeks ago. No fear in her movements. No hesitation. Just calm, steady steps. The queen watched her approach. She did not growl or bare her teeth. She simply waited. Yuna stopped a few meters away from the carcass. She looked at it, some kind of 6-legged deer creature, big enough to feed the whole camp for days. Then she looked up at the queen. Thank you, she said softly. She knew the queen could not understand her words, but she hoped the tone would carry the meaning. She bowed her head slightly. The same gesture she had made the night before. The queen made that low, soft sound again, the one that was almost gentle. Then she dipped her own massive head in return. Behind Yuna, she heard Yoonji gasp. Dohan swore under his breath. But Yuna did not look away from the queen. I understand, Yuna said. You saved us last night. You want us to know you're not our enemy. The queen held her gaze for another long moment. Then, slowly, she turned and walked back into the forest. Yuna let out a breath she did not know she was holding. Her legs were shaking again, just like they had after her first encounter with a Shral. But she felt something else too, a warmth in her chest that she could not quite name. Hope, maybe. Or connection. That night, they cooked the meat the queen had brought. It was delicious, rich, and tender, better than anything they had eaten since the crash. The survivors gathered around the fire, eating and talking in low voices about what had happened. Yoonji sat next to Yuna, her tablet full of notes. I've been thinking about this all day, she said. The queen's behavior, the offering, the way she responded to you. I think I understand what's happening. Tell me. She's been watching you for weeks. She's seen how you care for the cubs, how you stand between them and danger, how you're willing to die for them. In her world, that's the most important thing a creature can be, a protector of young ones. Yunji pulled up her footage of the queen with her own cubs. Look at how she behaves with them. She's gentle, patient. She grooms them and feeds them first and keeps them close to her body when they sleep. Sound familiar? Yuna looked at her own cubs, piled in Jisu's lap nearby. Bori was chewing on Taro's ear while Nabi tried to sleep. Gomi and Haru were curled together like a silver ball of fur. Duri was watching Yuna with those big golden eyes, waiting for her to come back to him. She sees herself in me, Yuna said slowly. And she sees what? A potential ally? More than that, I think. The rival pack is still out there. They'll come back eventually, they always do. The queen knows she can't fight them alone. She's lost too many of her pack, too many of her cubs. She needs help, and she thinks we can help her? Yunji shrugged. Humans are strange and unpredictable. We don't run when we should. We don't fight the way other creatures fight. We're confusing and dangerous in ways she doesn't fully understand. But she's seen you stand against predators without fear. She's seen your cubs, your small pack, stand with you instead of running away. The xenobiologist smiled slightly. In her eyes, you're not prey. You're not a rival. You're something new. A different kind of apex. And right now, she needs all the allies she can get. Over the following days, the queen returned several times. She always brought food, sometimes a fresh kill, sometimes strange fruits that Yunji tested carefully before declaring safe to eat. She never came close to the camp. She would leave her offerings at the tree line and wait until Yuna came to acknowledge them. It became a ritual. Yuna would walk out to meet her, bow her head, say thank you. The queen would dip her head in return and leave. No words were exchanged. How could there be? But understanding grew between them anyway. The other survivors were divided. Some thought Yuna was crazy, that she was going to get everyone killed. Others watched the exchanges with wonder, seeing something beautiful taking shape between two species that should have been enemies. Jisu watched too. She never went with Yuna to meet the queen, but she was always waiting when Yuna came back. Are you scared? Jisu asked one evening. When you go out there alone? Yuna considered the question carefully. Yes, she admitted, but less every time. I'm starting to understand her, and I think she's starting to understand me. What if you're wrong? What if she turns on you? Yuna looked at the cubs, who were playing a complicated game that seemed to involve a lot of pouncing and squeaking. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. But I don't think I'm wrong, Jisu. I think we're building something here. Something that's never happened before. What? Yuna smiled a real smile, the kind she had not felt on her face since before the crash. Trust. In the forest, hidden among the purple glass leaves, the predator queen watched the human camp. She saw the female with the silver fur creatures gathered around her. She saw the way the other humans looked at the female, with respect, with something like awe. The queen understood. The female was important to her pack, just as the queen was important to hers. They were the same. Different shapes, different sounds, different everything. But the same where it mattered. Protectors, mothers, leaders. The queen settled down to watch, her 3 remaining cubs pressed against her side. The night was quiet. The rival pack had not returned. For now, they were safe. For now, they had allies. And that was more than she had ever expected to find. 8 months had passed since the crash of the Bright Horizon. The survivors had built a real settlement, now wooden structures with proper roofs, gardens growing alien vegetables, a system of alarms and defenses that kept them safe. They had lost more people along the way, to accidents and illness and the occasional predator attack. But they had survived. Against all odds, they had made this hostile planet into something like a home. The Falari cubs were not cubs anymore. They had grown into sleek, powerful creatures, each one as big as a large dog. Their silver fur had darkened to steel gray, and their golden eyes held an intelligence that sometimes startled the humans who looked into them. They were no longer helpless babies who needed protection. They were hunters now, fast and deadly, capable of taking down prey twice their size. But they never left Yuna's side. Bori had become a guardian, always alert, always watching for threats. Nabi was the gentle one, spending her time with the children of the settlement, letting them climb on her back and pull her ears. Taro still got into trouble, but now his mischief involved stealing food from the kitchen rather than getting lost in the wreckage. Gomi had grown out of his laziness and become a skilled tracker. Haru was the fastest creature anyone had ever seen, able to outrun even the young Shral. And Dori the smallest, the one who had growled at the predator queen on that very first night, had become Yuna's constant shadow, sleeping curled around her head every night. They were her family, her pack, her children in every way that mattered. The relationship with the Shral had grown stronger too. The Predator Queen's pack had settled near the human camp, creating a buffer zone that kept other dangerous creatures away. It was not friendship, exactly. Humans and Shral were too different for that. But it was alliance. It was understanding that the Queen still visited regularly. She would appear at the tree line and wait for Yuna to come greet her. Sometimes she brought food. Sometimes she just came to watch. Her 3 remaining cubs had grown too, though they were still young by Shral standards. They had learned to recognize Yuna, and they no longer fled when she approached. The rival pack had returned once, 3 months after their first attack. They had come in force, the one-eyed alpha leading them, ready to claim the territory they believed was rightfully theirs. They had not expected what they found. The humans and the Queen's pack had fought together. It was messy and terrifying, and nothing like the organized battles in the older stories. But they had won. The rival alpha had fled with his tail between his legs, his pack scattered and broken. He had not returned since. That battle had changed things. The survivors no longer looked at the Shral with only fear. Some of them had begun learning the creature's language, the clicks and growls and body movements that carried meaning. Yunji had written a whole dictionary of Shral communication, though she admitted it was probably full of mistakes. Yuna had learned the most. She could tell when the Queen was happy or sad or worried. She knew which sounds meant danger and which meant peace. She could even make some of the simpler clicks herself. Though the Shral always seemed amused by her attempts, the Queen had a name Yuna had discovered. It was a complex series of sounds that human throats could not quite produce. But Yuna had tried anyway, and the Queen had responded with what might have been laughter, rumbling sound deep in her chest that shook the ground. After that, the Queen had started calling Yuna something too. A short, sharp click followed by a low hum. Yunji thought it meant something like small protector or brave soft one. Yuna liked to think it meant friend. On the morning, the rescue ships appeared in the sky. Yuna was sitting by the stream with Jisoo and the cubs. They had been talking about the future, about what would happen when they finally got off this planet, about the lives they would build on whatever world they ended up on. Jisoo was 18 now, no longer the scared silent girl Yuna had found in the wreckage. She smiled easily. She laughed. She had grown into someone strong and kind, the kind of person her parents would have been proud of. "Do you think they'll let us keep the cubs?" Jisoo asked. "On whatever colony we end up at." Yuna scratched behind Bori's ears. The big Falari rumbled with pleasure. "They'll have to. These 6 aren't going anywhere without me, and I'm not going anywhere without them." "What about—" Jisoo hesitated. "What about the Queen?" Yuna was quiet for a moment. She had thought about this a lot. The Queen had become important to her, not just as an ally, but as something more. A connection. a kindred spirit in a universe that often felt cold and empty. She belongs here, Yuna said finally. This is her home, her territory. I can't take that from her. Will she be okay without us? I think so. The rival pack is gone. Her cubs are growing strong. And she's learned something from us, I think. Something about working together instead of fighting alone. Yuna smiled sadly. She'll be fine. That was when they heard the sound, a deep rumbling from the sky that grew louder and louder until it drowned out everything else. Yuna looked up and saw shapes descending through the clouds. Ships. Human ships. Rescue had finally come. The next few hours were chaos. The ships landed at the edge of the settlement. Soldiers in clean uniforms poured out, followed by doctors and engineers and people with cameras who wanted to document everything. The survivors were examined, questioned, fed food that tasted strange after so many months of alien meat and vegetables. Yuna stayed with her cubs through all of it. She answered questions when she had to, but mostly she just watched. Watched the soldiers setting up equipment. Watched the doctors treating the injured. Watched the camera crews filming everything for the news feeds back on Earth. When they tried to separate her from the Falari, she refused. When they insisted, the cubs gathered around her in a protective circle. Their steel gray fur bristling, their growls low and dangerous. The soldiers backed off quickly. They're imprinted on her, Yunji explained to the confused rescue team. You can't separate them. They'll die first, and so will anyone who tries. The lead officer, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes, looked at Yuna with something like respect. You kept them alive for 8 months on this rock? We kept each other alive, Yuna corrected. The officer nodded slowly. They can stay with you. All of them. We'll figure out the paperwork later. That evening, as the sun set over Varus 7 for what would be one of the last times Yuna would ever see it, she walked to the tree line. The cubs followed her, as always. Jisoo came too, staying a few steps behind. The Predator Queen was waiting. She emerged from the shadows like she always did. Massive, graceful, terrifying to anyone who did not know her. Her 4 eyes gleamed in the fading light. Her scales had taken on a deep red color as the sun touched them. Yuna walked up to her slowly. This time, she did not stop at a safe distance. She walked until she was close enough to touch. The queen lowered her head until her eyes were level with Yuna's. They looked at each other for a long moment. No words were needed. They had said everything they needed to say over these long months. I have to go, Yuna said softly. My people are leaving, but I wanted to say goodbye. The queen made a sound low and soft and sad. She understood. Maybe not the words, but the meaning. Yuna reached out and touched the queen's snout. The scales were warm and smooth, like sun-heated stone. The queen did not pull away. Thank you, Yuna whispered. For everything? Saving us. For trusting us. For showing me that we're not as different as we look. The queen made that gentle humming sound again. Then she did something she had never done before. She reached out with one massive clawed hand and touched Yuna's chest, right over her heart. The touch was feather-light, careful, almost reverent. Then she pulled back, dipped her head one final time, and turned away. Her 3 cubs appeared from the shadows, falling into step behind her. Together, they walked into the forest and disappeared. Yuna watched them go. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. Jisoo came up beside her, slipping her hand into Yuna's. Are you okay? Yeah. Yuna wiped her eyes with her free hand. Yeah, I'm okay. The cubs pressed against her legs, their warm bodies solid and comforting. Bori, Naudi, Taro, Gomi, Haru, Duri, her family, her pack. Let's go home, she said. The rescue ship lifted off the next morning. Yuna sat by a window, watching Varus 7 grow smaller and smaller below them. The cubs were piled around her as always, dozing in the warmth of the cabin. Jishu was asleep with her head on Yuna's shoulder. Just before the planet disappeared from view, Yuna saw something dot at the edge of the tree line, where the purple glass forest met the valley where they had crashed so many months ago. A massive shape stood watching the sky, 4 eyes gleaming, red scales catching the light. The predator queen. Watching them go, Yuna raised her hand and pressed it against the window. Far below, the queen dipped her head, just once, and vanished into the trees. The ship jumped to faster than light speed, and Vareth 7 was gone, but Yuna would never forget. None of them would dot in the vast darkness of space. Humanity had discovered something important. Their greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers or their weapons. It was something older, deeper. The instinct to stand between danger and the small things that trusted them. And sometimes, even the most fearsome predators recognized that instinct for what it was. Respect. Yuna closed her eyes and let the warmth of her cubs lull her to sleep.